Hi, everybody. Welcome to Basic Human Biology, and this is Biology 100. And of course, it's nice to see everybody, quote unquote, in this class. And you're a variety of individuals pursuing a myriad of things for professional reasons. And I hope that this first chapter in Memler's book on anatomy and physiology in terms of disease will be helpful and will assist you in learning the basic methods that are successful for the or to be successful in this class. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 1 deals with the organization of the human body. And we're going to go through and look at some terms as well as for defining some terms that you need to know for anatomy and physiology, and then also look at some directional terms so that you can equate and properly describe the location of a pain or, an injury or any kind of circumstance that would require you to note where something is occurring. So what this first chapter does is just kind of breaks down how all of the body is defined and also how it is organized according to planes. So let's get started here. So if we look at some of the body studies, of course we have in the sciences for us, we have anatomy, physiology, and pathology. And all of our organisms are broken down into smaller and smaller parts. And of course we have, at the very smallest level, we have chemicals like sodium and potassium, and you'll find that those are very important in the nervous system. And then those chemicals come together and they make up cells. And so if you really think about like the human body, which is kind of crazy, we are nothing more than a bunch of atoms, and atoms are, with a proton and a neutron in the nucleus, and then we have electrons that are spinning around and make up all of these different elements. Well, these elements come together and they get organized into a cell, and they make up membranes like the cell membrane that goes around any one of our cells. Like it could be a epithelial cell in our skin, or a cardiac cell, which would be in our heart. And so if you consider that, it is nothing more than a bunch of atoms and they are coalescing, coming together, then you determine that these things are getting larger and larger, or making more and more cells, and then those cells come together to form a tissue, and then the tissues comprise an organ, and then the organs make up a system, and then eventually you have organisms. There are 11 different systems that we're going to look at in depth in this course. And of course, those systems change as we age, and we'll introduce some of those things as well. Body direction, we're going to be looking at some of those, like I said, directional terms, as well as how we cut the body in imaginary planes, and we'll look at all of that. homeostasis and all of what organs are found in the body cavities as well. All right, so some of these things that we need to be aware of are key terms. And if you just kind of look over those, we will go into some of them in more depth than others, and then with some we will totally omit them. But let's just kind of move along here. Okay, so we have 5 key ideas, and if you look at each chapter under a unit heading, I have some objectives. And pay particular attention to the objectives for each chapter. You will have a chapter quiz for each one of the objectives, and then you are expected to look at these videos, and then which go through the PowerPoint, and then to take the quiz, and all of that is in preparation for the exams, of which there will be 6. And I went over that with the syllabus. But in any event, structure and function and levels of organization, these are just key ideas, and how they're broken down and what page and in the chapter that you can find them. Okay, so if we define some terms: anatomy, physiology, and pathology. That's one of the main objectives that we have for this chapter. And then to describe the organization of the body, from the chemical to the whole organism. I'm not really concentrating on that so much in this chapter, but you should understand the basic levels of organization that we have, which you probably had since 5th grade, in terms of cells making up tissues, making up organs, and organs making up the organ system. Also be able to identify the 11 different body systems, and give a general function of what each of those does. Homeostasis, I'll go into that a little bit, but I'm not going to concentrate on it. You just need to know like the overarching idea of what homeostasis involves. And in terms of a negative feedback loop, which I'll give you some examples of that, as well as a positive feedback loops. The negative feedback loops are much more common than the positive ones. Okay, and then we have barriers that are within our body that kind of compartmentalize the organisms. And then in terms of the effect of how fluids flow from one region to the other. These 2 objectives are not of primary importance. Again, look at the chapter objectives that I have listed for chapter 1. But now 8 and 9 are very important. You do need to know the main directional terms for the body, and define the 3 planes of division for the body. And then as well as the subdivisions for the dorsal and the ventral cavities, and then what subdivisions are found in the abdomen, and the anterior and posterior body regions. I'm not going to worry about the case study. So if we look at some of these terms, the anatomy, which is the study of the body structure, and how we study that is through dissection. Maybe you had some opportunities to dissect some animals in a previous biology class, but in any event, its anatomy is what the body looks like, and then the physiology is how does it function? How do all of those organs and organ systems function to and be integrated to make up the whole of the organism? Pathology, of course, is the study of diseases which are equated with each one of those systems, and as well as the organs when they fail. I went through some of this, and in this we are looking at the chemicals, as I stated, and they come together to make the whole of a cell. The cells make tissues comprise the organs, and then you get an organ system, and this is depicting the digestive system, and then that is elevated to the organism. Okay, we have several different body systems that are organized according to their function. So for protection, support, and movement, we have the integumentary system, which is your skin, your nails, hair, and then the skeletal system, which of course are your bones of your skeleton and your joints, and then your muscular system, which is all of your muscles, which are all of your muscles. Coordination and control are comprising two systems. Those are the nervous and the endocrine system. We've got circulation and immunity, which are the cardiovascular, and then the lymphatic system. You know, we almost overlook the lymphatic system, this drainage system that drains all of our fluids. And then we have for energy supply and to maintain that fluid balance, there's the respiratory, the digestive, and the urinary systems. And then, of course, we have the reproductive system for the production of offspring. So if you count those up, we have 3 under protection and support, 2 under the coordination and control, which make up 5. For circulation and immunity, we have 2 more, which is 7. And then we have 3 for energy, which is 10, and then the reproductive for the production of offspring, which make up the 11th system. Okay. And some of the things that happen as we age in terms of the body systems, we get wrinkled and we have gray hair. And then, of course, we have decreased kidney function, the loss of bone mass, which is, you know, osteoarthritis and or osteoporosis, sorry. And then we have plaque, which builds up and forms deposits within our blood system. Okay, and then if you look at all of the functions for those, and this can be found, this chart can actually be found in your textbook. Let me look. I'll take that back, but they may not have it in your textbook. But this is a no, I don't see it. But this is a nice little review of all of the systems, and well, it might be there, but it isn't. And what functions and components are found under each one of those 11 systems. I think that it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, some checkpoints here. You might want to ask yourself, what are the studies of the body structure and the body function called? And I'll, give you a minute to kind of think about that before you look it up. And then what do organs working together combine to form? So kind of just look at these and see if you can answer them. the most suitable field for the study of an anatomist. So if you look at this, and pretty much it would be the structure of the stomach. Okay, and then there are numerous levels of organization in the body, and we went through this, and if you look, it would be the cell, tissue, or organ system, and organism. And then bones and joints, which I just said, you should know that that is the skeletal system. Homeostasis is this next section, and it looks at negative feedback, which is much more prevalent in the human body as compared to positive feedback. So some examples of homeostasis might be, like, say that you are outside in the cold, and your body temperature as a result of being exposed to the elements are or is lowering your body temperature. Well, there's a feedback system that goes from your body temperature, and it is signaled in your brain to tell your muscles to start shivering. And when that happens, the muscle movement creates energy, which creates heat, and then it warms your body back up. And then that signal of the body temperature rising goes back to the brain, and then you stop shivering. So that's an example of a feedback loop, and it works much like a furnace within your house, where the temperature falls, and it sends a signal to the furnace or to the heat pump, and then your heating system cranks up, and it delivers the hot air to the space in the house. It warms up the home, and then it feeds back with the rise of the temperature in the house, and then the heating system will turn off. So that's an example of a negative feedback system. So it is responsible for homeostasis, for maintaining an internal balance within your body, and this is something that I just related in terms of like body temperature, and then you have some other mechanisms that use the same feedback loop, and that would be like for the maintenance of body fluids, and then you have for the amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide waste, as those are increasing or decreasing in your blood. There is a feedback system that goes again to your brain, and it says to breathe more heavily, to expel some of that extra carbon dioxide, as well as blood pressure is a negative feedback loop, to try to bring your blood pressure down. Okay, so as I said, you have some kind of a sensor, and that is, it could be a nerve, it could be the rise in a blood pressure, or the lowering of your body temperature, which sends a signal to a control center. Most of the time it's your brain, and then that is going to send an impulse, which is meant or called the effector, which is going to alter whatever is out of kilter, like with your temperature within your body. The brain sends a signal to the muscles via a nerve track, and it tells the muscles to then start shivering, and then it sends that particular nerve impulse back to the brain to say that your body has begun to warm up, and then you are back and have reached homeostasis again. Okay, so, and then again, this is just the same thing with your thermostat in your house. Okay. And I gave you this information of how we maintain that set point. So we always have a set point for our blood oxygen level, for our body temperature, for our blood pressure. All of these are within normal limits. When it falls to either side, then that's when the feedback loop is encountered, and it goes into kicks in order to allow for a homeostatic balance to occur. Okay, and again, some of these things, negative feedback loops are much more prevalent than the positive. So here, look at the definition for homeostasis and what the three components are. I'm going to, because I'm not concentrating on this, I'm going to skip through the pop quizzes and the flows and barriers, and we're going to move on to body direction. So you should be able to understand and study the learning objectives here for numbers 8 and 9. So you need to be able to list and define the main directional terms for the body, and be able to list and define the 3 planes of division for the body. In terms of the standardized terms for body direction, superior and inferior. Superior means anything above. Inferior means anything below. So if you are looking at the human body, and you're asking for the direction of the head in terms of or in relation to, and it's always related to something else, in relation to the chest. The head would be superior to the chest. Your legs would be inferior to your chest. And then we look at anterior and posterior directions. Anterior is ventral, is another term for it, and is towards the front. Posterior is towards the back, and it's also called the dorsal. Then we have medial and we have lateral. Medial is towards the midline of your body. So if you divide your body right down the center through your nose, that would be the medial. And then towards the outside, like your arms would be lateral to your navel. Okay, and then we have proximal and we have distal. Proximal is closer to, and distal is further away. So in as an example, your wrist would be proximal to your hand. Your shoulder would be distal to your wrist, further away. Okay. So, and when we look at this, we are assuming that the body is in an anatomic position. What's meant by an anatomic position is that you are standing erect, just standing up. Your palms are facing forward. So, you see the palm of your hand, but your arms are down by your side, along the lateral side, but your palms are facing forward. okay, and your feet are just slightly apart, facing forward. That is considered to be the anatomic position. And here is a drawing of a anatomic model. And so what is the scientific name for this position? Again, it's the anatomic position. And if you note, her palms are facing forward. Now, if you look at this individual, they are saying for the arm, proximal is closer to, and distal is further away. Posterior is towards the back, which is also known as dorsal, and then the ventral is towards the front, okay, which is the anterior. Medial is along the midline, and then lateral is towards the sides. Okay. We also look at dividing the body according to planes. And so if you were to cut the body in different directions, we have 3 planes of cut: the frontal, the sagittal, and the transverse. The frontal is if you were to divide the body from the top of your head through your ears, and you continued all the way to your feet, you would get a anterior and a posterior part. So that's the frontal plane. The sagittal plane is, and I think we have it here. So if you are looking at it and you're going straight down through your nose, so that's a sagittal plane. And the transverse is into upper and lower parts, so you're cut through the center. Most often, these sorts of directional terms are in relation to some of the body imaging techniques that we have, like a CT scan, and they like a CT or an MRI, and that's the way that they are dividing the images up, going from head to foot, usually by like a transverse or the horizontal plane. Okay, and then we have, again, so these are some of the terms that are used for this imaging, for describing the tissues. So we have a cross section, a longitudinal section, and an oblique section. A cross section, as you can imagine, is just cutting right through something. So if you are looking at, say, a tube, and you cut it from because it's a circle, there is just going to be slices, like slicing a piece of bologna or a roll of bologna, and those are cross sections for each slice. A longitudinal section would be like slicing a banana along the entire length of it and making a banana split. An oblique section is cutting it sort of off center, so it's at an angle. And I'm not familiar with any kind of technique that we use for that, other than in tissue sections. Okay, so there's the cross section, the longitudinal section along the length, and then the oblique is at an angle. And here we have some imaging of a transverse section, as you can see. So it's cut through the midline, straight through. Okay, so what terms mean closer to the body's midline? Of course, that would be the medial. And then a plane that divides the body into anterior and posterior parts. So that would be the frontal plane. Okay, so you got a front half and a back half. And then for the next section, we divide the body up into body regions and cavities. So once we have these sections, like the dorsal and the ventral, then we can further subdivide it in order to describe what organs are within that region, and then be able to describe where an individual might be indicating some kind of a pain. Okay, so when we look at this, we have two major body cavities. We have the dorsal and the ventral. The dorsal, again, is towards the back, posterior. The ventral is towards the front or the anterior. In the dorsal back part, the posterior side, we have the cranial and the spinal cavities. The ventral side is towards the front, and those are the thoracic and the abdominal cavities. More organs are found in the ventral cavity than in the dorsal. So here is a diagram of the dorsal and the ventral cavities, and what sections are indicated by those. And if you look, you have the diaphragm, which is separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominopelvic cavity. And the abdominopelvic cavity consists of the abdominal as well as the pelvic cavity. On the dorsal side, we have the cranium, which is housed within the cranial cavity, and then we have the spinal cord, which is along our dorsal side and is in the spinal cavity. And if you look at the thoracic cavity, along the midline of the thoracic cavity and separating the two lobes of the lung is called the mediastinum. And the heart is within that region. We have the thoracic cavity, which has a lining around the thoracic cavity, and it has it contains the pleural cavity where our lungs are. The other organ within that thoracic cavity is our heart, and that is housed within the pericardial cavity. Then separating the thoracic cavity from the pelvic and the abdominopelvic cavity is your diaphragm. So hopefully everybody can see that. All right, so again, when we look at the abdominal cavity, we have the abdominopelvic cavity, we have two subdivisions. The abdominal cavity, which would, as you can expect, house the spleen, the liver, the stomach, the large and small intestine, right? And then we have the pelvic cavity, which would house our urinary system. Now, when we're describing a area that a patient might be indicating pain, we divide the body below the breastbone into 9 regions. If you look at the central portion of those 9 regions in that grid, the uppermost is called the epigastric. The middle, where our navel is called the umbilical, and then the lowest portion, which would be like in the middle of the body, and closest to our genital area, is the hypogastric. To the right and left of that grid are the hypochondriac, starting at the most superior, the hypochondriac, The central is the lumbar, and then the bottom is the iliac. We describe those according to right and left sides. And it's your right and left side. So it would be on the side for your right arm. You would have the right hypochondriac up at the top, and it would be just where the ribs are beginning or ending. And then you would have the lumbar, the right lumbar, and then the right iliac. On the left side, you would have the left hypochondriac, the left lumbar, and the left iliac. But as you know, as long as you can sort of recall and study the names for the central region, I think that it's pretty self-explanatory that the midline is around your navel, and that's the umbilical. And then above that is the epigastric. Epi means above, and then hypo means below, and then you have the hypogastric below the navel. And then you're on your right and left sides, hypochondriac right and left, the lumbar, and think about your lumbar vertebrae. It's sort of in the middle on your back, and then you have the iliac, and that's related actually to your pelvis. Okay, so those are the nine regions. So if you need to describe a particular area where a patient might be indicating a pain, you would define it according to one of these 9 areas. And then we have 4 quadrants. Again, this would be the same idea. You would be identifying a area based upon which quadrant it was in. So you have the right upper quadrant, and it would be your right upper, the left upper quadrant, the right lower quadrant, and the left lower quadrant. So it would be dividing the body along the midline of the center, like a transverse section, and then everything above it would be the right and left upper quadrant. Everything below it would be the right lower and right and left lower quadrant. Okay. And then these are some other body regions. And if you look at these, like the foot is the pedal. So where would you find a pedal pulse? And it would be in your foot. Okay. Where would you find a cervical pain? That would be in your neck, right? Okay. Maybe another one, where would you find a popliteal pain? That would be on the back of the knee. So if we are to define the 2 main body cavities, that would be the thoracic and the abdominopelvic, and then the 3 central regions and the 3 left and right lateral regions of the abdomen. So that would be going back and looking at the 9 regions. So you should be able to do that, okay? So if you don't remember that, just go back and sort of review the 9 regions, with the umbilical being in the center, the epigastric above, the hypogastric below. And then you have your left and right hypochondriac, the lumbar, and then the iliac, right and left. Okay, so that's what that is referring to. So which organ is not in the abdominopelvic cavity? Which one would you think would not be in the abdominopelvic cavity? The lung. Okay. Which abdominal region is most inferior and medial? So inferior and medial. So that would be above, right? I mean below. And then medial. hypogastric. Which anatomic adjectives describe the anterior thigh? So that would be the upper portion of your thigh above your knee. That would be the femoral region where your femur is. Stasis means like homeostasis. That's constant. Okay. Now, in terms of some of these case studies, I'm not going to ask any of those, but that sort of concludes this chapter, and I would suggest that you do the chapter objective quiz, which is graded, and then also there is a study guide that is on under a module that you can complete as well in preparation for the first exam. First exam will cover chapters 1, 3, and 4. Okay, have a nice day, and I'll see you very shortly with chapter 3. So we have 1, 3, and 4. I am skipping chapter 2 because it has a lot of chemistry and you really don't need that. All righty, have a nice day. All righty. Now, I got to get this up online. Let's see. I have to do what? I have to save that. Let me see here. I have to save this file. So let me save it. I hope it recorded it. Let's see here. Awesome, it saved it for today. That makes me so happy. All right. YouTube email. Okay.